On a rainy afternoon, Juma hurried through the busy city market. The sky was gray, and the rain came down in steady drops, making the streets shine and the puddles reflect the lights from shops and cars. He held his jacket tight around him, trying to keep warm and dry. People rushed past him, umbrellas in their hands, some laughing and talking, others focused on getting home before the rain got heavier. The market was full of noise, vendors shouting their prices, children running through the streets, and the constant splash of water under feet. As Juma walked quickly, he noticed someone sitting by the side of the street. She was small, wearing old clothes that were wet from the rain, and she held a small worn-out cup in her hands. Her hair was tied back simply and she looked tired, but there was something calm about her face. The people around her barely noticed her. They passed by quickly, looking at their phones or hurrying to their destinations, paying no attention. Juma slowed down a little, his steps faltering. Something about the girl, Nia, caught his attention. She did not cry or beg loudly. She simply sat quietly, her eyes watching the people move around her. A few coins clinked in her cup, but it was very little. Her expression was patient, waiting but not demanding. Juma felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to keep walking like everyone else, to ignore her and stay on schedule. But another part felt a tug at his heart. He looked down at the puddles as he walked, his shoes splashing through the water. He remembered mornings when he was a child and his mother had taught him to always help others if he could. She had said, even a small kindness can make someone's day. But he was busy, he thought. He had meetings to attend, things to do, people waiting for him. Life was complicated and he had responsibilities. Still, he could not completely ignore Nia. He caught a glimpse of her face again, and her eyes met his for a brief moment. There was no shame or anger there, just a calmness that made him pause. He felt uncomfortable. A little voice in his mind whispered, "Should I have helped?" He walked a few more steps but could not shake the thought. Every step felt heavier, and the city sounds seemed distant for a moment. He thought about all the times he had ignored people asking for help. At first, he told himself it was because he had nothing to give, or that it was not his responsibility. But deep inside he knew it was also fear. Fear of being scammed, fear of losing money, fear of being late, fear of discomfort. But looking at Nia now, he wondered if all those fears were really important compared to a chance to help someone. Juma's eyes wandered to the people around. A man with a big bag hurried past, not noticing Nia at all. A woman with bright shoes walked by, glancing at the street but ignoring the girl. Even a small boy with a little chocolate in his hand ran past without thinking twice. Everyone seemed busy, caught up in their own world. Juma realized how easy it was to pass by and do nothing. How often people avoided looking, avoided feeling the small tug of empathy inside. Nia shifted slightly, moving her cup closer, but she did not make any sound. She looked up at him again, her eyes soft, almost like she was asking for something he could not see in words. It was strange, he thought. She was not asking in the loud, desperate way that made people uncomfortable. She simply existed there, quietly, letting the world move around her. Juma felt a pang of guilt. He had passed her many times in the past, he realized, without a single thought. Rain dripped down from the roof of a nearby shop onto the street, and Juma lifted his jacket collar to cover his neck. He paused for a moment, standing under the small shelter of an overhang. He watched Nia again. She looked up at him with the same calm expression. It was almost like she knew he was thinking about her, like she could see inside his mind. A strange warmth spread in his chest, mixed with the guilt that had been growing since he noticed her. He thought about his own life. His small apartment, his comfortable shoes, his regular meals. He had everything he needed. And yet, here was someone with nothing, sitting quietly, asking for so little. Just a little help, a little attention. Could it really be that small? Could it really make such a difference? He wanted to believe that giving something would help, even if it was just a coin or some food. For a moment, he imagined handing her something. He could reach into his pocket, give her a coin, smile, and walk away feeling better about himself. But he hesitated. Thoughts of his schedule, his busy day, his own responsibilities came rushing back. He told himself he didn't have time, that he had other priorities. But the little voice would not go away. "Should I have helped?" it whispered again, soft but insistent. Juma continued walking, slower this time. His mind replayed memories from his childhood, helping neighbors, sharing small things with people who had less. He remembered the happiness he felt when he gave something without expecting anything in return. That happiness now seemed distant, but the memory made him pause again. He looked at Nia once more. She was still there, holding her cup, watching the world go by. He realized she had been there for hours and probably would be there for many more, waiting quietly. He felt a strange connection to her. It was not just about giving money. It was about noticing someone, about seeing their humanity, about understanding that every person had a story, a struggle, and a life that mattered. He wondered what her story was. Why was she there? Did she have family? Did she have dreams? The questions filled his mind, and he felt a heaviness he could not explain. Finally, he took a deep breath. He slowed down even more and stopped a few feet away. He looked at her face again, really looked. There was dignity there, even in her quiet struggle. There was patience and calm. He realized that ignoring her would not just be a small act, it would be letting his own fears decide for him. It would be turning away from a chance to do something meaningful, even if it was small. He shifted his bag on his shoulder, thinking of the coin he had in his pocket. It was not much, but it could help in some way. But he still hesitated. His mind argued, what if she doesn't need it? What if it is not enough? What if I embarrass her? But the little voice would not go away. Should I have helped? It repeated, softly, steadily, like a gentle push. Juma felt a mix of fear, guilt, and compassion swirling inside him. He looked at Nia one last time and realized that she was not asking for his fear or his judgment. She was simply asking to be seen, to be noticed, to have someone recognize her existence in a busy, rushing world. He realized that was all it took. A small act, a brief moment of attention could mean so much. He took a step closer, then stopped again. His heart beat fast, not because of the rain or the busy streets, but because he understood something important for the first time in a long while. Life moved quickly, people rushed past, but some moments demanded a pause. Some moments demanded empathy, awareness, and a little courage to do the right thing. The rain fell steadily, washing the streets and making everything shine. Juma stood there looking at Nia. He reached slowly into his pocket, feeling the coin in his hand. That evening, Juma sat in his small apartment, the soft glow of a single lamp lighting the room. Outside, the rain continued to fall, tapping lightly against the window pane. He had taken off his wet jacket and placed it on a chair, but the chill from the rain still lingered. His mind, however, was far from the cold or the damp. It was filled with thoughts of Nia, the girl he had seen earlier in the street. He could not stop thinking about her, the quiet way she had sat with her cup, and the calm expression on her face that seemed so out of place in the busy, noisy city. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. It was strange how a single encounter could create so many feelings. He thought of the countless times he had ignored people asking for help. Sometimes it was a beggar on the street, sometimes a stranger asking for directions or assistance, and sometimes even friends or acquaintances quietly asking for small favors. At the time, he always told himself it was nothing serious, that someone else could help, or that he was too busy to stop. But now, sitting in the quiet of his apartment, he felt a pang of guilt that he could not shake. He remembered last week, walking past an old man at a bus stop. The man had been shaking slightly, holding a torn hat in his hands, asking for a little money to buy food. Juma had glanced quickly, muttered a silent excuse in his mind and walked away. At the time he had felt justified. He was late for a meeting. He had bills to pay. He had his own problems. But now, the memory returned, sharper than before, and he could feel the old man's sadness as if it were real again. He realized that ignoring people, no matter how small the act, left a mark on both the giver and the one who was ignored. Juma's thoughts drifted to other times in his life. He remembered a day when he had refused to give a coin to a little boy selling flowers on the street. The boy had smiled shyly, offering a single red flower, and Juma had turned away. He had felt a small relief at keeping his money, but now he remembered the disappointment in the boy's eyes. He wondered what had happened to him. Was he hungry? Did he go home with nothing to eat? Juma felt a tightness in his chest. How could he have been so blind to the pain of others? The memory of Nia made him feel even more aware of his mistakes. She had not begged loudly. She had not demanded anything. She simply existed in her space, quietly asking for recognition, for someone to notice her struggle. And yet, so many people, including Juma himself, had walked past without seeing her. How easy it was to ignore those in need, he realized. How easy it was to pretend that their lives did not matter, when in reality, every small life mattered deeply. He sat quietly, thinking about the little voice in his mind that had whispered to him in the street, asking if he should have helped. That voice was still there, soft but persistent, echoing in his thoughts. He realized it was more than just a passing feeling. It was a call to pay attention, to act, to feel, and to do something meaningful. And yet, the hesitation he had felt in the street was part of him too, the part that worried about being late, about being uncomfortable, about losing money. These fears had stopped him from acting before, but now he understood that they were small compared to the opportunity to make a difference. Juma looked around his apartment. Everything seemed so normal, so ordinary. His small table with a cup of tea, his books stacked neatly on the shelf, his coat drying by the chair, it all felt ordinary. But the thought of Nia sitting in the cold, wet street, with barely anything to her name, made the ordinary feel heavy. He realized how lucky he was in so many ways. He had food, a home, safety, and comfort. And yet, he had overlooked the power of sharing even a small part of what he had. He thought about the times he had done small acts of kindness in the past. Once, he had given an old woman a seat on the bus when she was tired. Another time, he had helped a neighbor carry groceries up the stairs. Those small acts had left him with a warm feeling in his heart, a quiet satisfaction that lasted the rest of the day. He realized now that the opposite was true too. The times he had refused to help left him with discomfort, with a lingering sense of guilt that refused to go away. It was a strange balance, he thought. The heart felt heavy when kindness was withheld, and light when it was given freely. Juma thought about what Nia might have experienced in her life to be sitting there on the street. He imagined her waking up in a small, cold place, without proper food, without warmth or comfort. Maybe she had family, maybe she did not. Perhaps she had dreams she could not pursue because survival came first. The thought made him feel a deep empathy for her, and also a sadness that such struggles existed in the world. But alongside the sadness, there was a spark of hope. Because even small acts of care, like noticing someone, offering a smile, or giving a coin, could make a difference in her life. He remembered reading stories about kindness and how small actions could create ripples. A smile to a stranger could lift their spirits. A little help could inspire hope. And he realized that he had underestimated the power of these small acts. He had thought that only big gestures mattered, that only grand actions could change the world. But Nia, simply existing quietly on the street, reminded him that small moments of recognition and care could have tremendous meaning. Juma thought about his own fears. The fear of being late, the fear of being tricked, the fear of discomfort. He realized how often fear stopped him from acting. How often he had let convenience win over conscience. And yet, he now understood that the courage to act, even in small ways, was more valuable than any comfort he could preserve. To hesitate was human, but to pause and do what was right even briefly was powerful. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, and the city lights reflected softly in the puddles. Juma felt a strange calm come over him. He realized that thinking about Nia, about helping others, was not just about her. It was about him too. It was about becoming a better person, someone who noticed, who cared, who acted with empathy. The reflection was uncomfortable, yes, but it was also necessary. Without reflection, he would continue to ignore small cries for help, and the guilt would grow heavier with every passing day. He thought about his parents and how they had taught him to care for others. Lessons learned in childhood often faded under the pressure of life, but now they returned vividly. The memory of his mother's voice telling him to help if he could, and to never ignore someone in need, was clear. Even a small kindness, she had said, can change someone's life. Juma smiled faintly, remembering her words. Perhaps he had forgotten them in the rush of life, but they had always been inside him, waiting to be remembered. He sat back and considered what he could do next. It was evening now, but tomorrow was another day. He could prepare himself, think ahead, and perhaps return to the street to offer Nia something. Not out of obligation but out of care. The idea gave him a sense of purpose, a quiet motivation that made his chest feel lighter. He realized that life was not just about his own comfort and convenience, it was also about noticing the small moments where he could make a difference. Juma's mind wandered again to the people in the street that afternoon. How many had walked past without seeing Nia? How many had pretended not to notice, caught up in their own lives? He realized that this was the reality of the world. People often ignored each other out of habit, fear, or self-interest. But he did not want to be like that. He wanted to be someone who saw, who cared, who acted even when it was small and inconvenient. The apartment was quiet, save for the rain and the soft hum of the city beyond the windows. Juma closed his eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. He thought about Nia, her calm face, the quiet dignity in the way she waited. She was more than a beggar. She was a person with a story, a life, and a right to be seen. The thought filled him with determination. He did not want to let the opportunity slip by again. He wanted to act, even in small ways, to acknowledge her presence, to show that he cared, and to make a difference in a world that often overlooked quiet suffering. By the time he finally stood up to make himself some tea, Juma felt a strange mixture of calm and resolve. The reflection had done its work. He understood, more than ever, that ignoring Nia or anyone else in need was a choice, but so was kindness. And tomorrow he decided he would choose differently. Even a small act of attention or care could mean more than he realized. He poured the tea, steam rising softly from the cup, and sat down again by the window. Watching the rain, he thought about how life moved quickly, how people hurried past each other, often without noticing the quiet struggles around them. But he also thought about how a small pause, a brief moment of care, could ripple outward, changing someone's day, perhaps even their life. The thought stayed with him as the evening deepened. He felt a lightness in his chest, a subtle hope. Reflection had shown him the weight of inaction, but it had also revealed the power of small choices. And in that quiet moment he made a promise to himself, not out loud but in his heart, that he would act when he could, that he would notice, that he would care. Even if it was just a small coin, a smile, or a few words, it would matter. And that was enough. The next morning, Juma woke up earlier than usual. The city was still quiet, and the rain from the previous day had stopped. The streets were wet, reflecting the sunlight that began to peek through the clouds. Juma felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness as he prepared to leave his small apartment. He thought about Nia sitting quietly on the street yesterday, and how she had stayed there despite the rain. He remembered the little voice inside him, the one that had whispered, "You can make a difference even if it is small." That thought had stayed with him through the night, and now he could not ignore it. He dressed quickly and stepped outside. The air was cool but fresh, carrying the faint smell of wet earth and the soft scent of flowers from nearby market stalls. People were beginning their day, rushing to work, buying bread, or chatting with friends. Juma walked through the streets slowly, looking for the spot where he had seen Nia the day before. He wanted to make sure he would find her. As he turned the corner, he saw her almost immediately. But this time it was not what he had expected. Nia was no longer sitting quietly with her cup. Instead, she was moving gently around the street, carrying small bags of food, handing them to stray animals and to people who seemed hungry or cold. A small boy sitting near a corner received a sandwich from her, and his eyes lit up with gratitude. A little stray dog wagged its tail as she poured some water into a small bowl she had brought. Nia smiled softly at the dog, brushing the wet fur gently with her hands. Juma stopped in his tracks. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Nia, who had seemed so quiet and fragile yesterday, was now busy helping others. Despite her own struggles, she was offering care, warmth, and attention to anyone who needed it. People noticed her too. Some smiled back, some nodded, and a few even took a moment to thank her. Her actions were small but meaningful, and they were creating a ripple of happiness around her. He remembered his own hesitation from yesterday. He had walked past her, unsure and fearful, and now he realized how much he had missed by not paying attention sooner. The image of Nia helping others made him feel a mixture of guilt and admiration. How could someone who had so little herself still find the strength to give to others? Juma felt a deep respect growing in his heart for her. She was teaching a lesson without words, showing that kindness did not need wealth or comfort. It only needed care and intention. As he walked closer, he noticed that Nia had arranged small pieces of bread on a cardboard box for pigeons, and she gently called them over. The birds came, pecking at the food carefully. Nia laughed softly, a sound that was warm and gentle, almost musical. Juma's heart lifted. He had never expected to see such joy and purpose coming from someone in her situation. It was surprising, even inspiring. She had turned a simple street corner into a place of small happiness. He watched her approach an elderly woman who seemed weak and tired. Nia handed her a small bag of food and helped her sit down on the edge of a bench. The woman looked up at Nia, eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, child," she whispered. Nia smiled and nodded politely, saying nothing more. Her quiet dignity struck Juma deeply. She was not asking for attention, and she was not seeking reward. She was giving because she wanted to, because she could, because she understood that the world needed small acts of care. Juma felt a strange warmth in his chest. The sight of Nia helping others stirred something inside him that he had not felt in a long time. He had always thought of helping others as a big responsibility, something that required time, money, and effort. But now he saw that it could be simple. A small gesture, a piece of bread, a smile, or even just noticing someone's presence could matter more than he had realized. Nia was proof of that. He approached slowly, unsure if he should speak or just watch. Nia looked up and caught his gaze. She smiled warmly at him, and it felt like she had already forgiven him for walking past yesterday. Her eyes were kind, gentle, and full of understanding. Juma felt a lump in his throat. He realized that he had underestimated her, and in doing so, he had underestimated the power of compassion itself. Nia handed a small sandwich to a young man who was sitting near a stall, looking hungry. The young man accepted it with a shy smile and began to eat carefully. Nia knelt down and gave some water to a small kitten hiding under the bench. Juma watched in awe. Despite having very little, she was sharing it freely, and it seemed to come naturally to her. He wondered how she found the energy, the courage, and the care to do so. It was surprising, and it made him reflect on his own life and priorities. He thought about how often he had rushed past people without noticing them. How often he had let fear, doubt, or convenience stop him from helping. And now he realized that the simple act of showing care, even when it was inconvenient, was one of the most meaningful things a person could do. Nia, despite her own hardships, was living proof that small kindnesses could change the mood of a street, the heart of a passerby, and perhaps even the day of someone who felt forgotten. The city street began to wake up more fully. People moved past, some glancing at Nia, some smiling in return. Children playing nearby paused to watch her, fascinated by her gentle actions. A street vendor gave her a small loaf of bread, nodding with appreciation. Nia accepted it quietly, then broke it into pieces to share with the pigeons. Every small gesture seemed to matter, creating a chain of care that spread slowly outward. Juma felt a mixture of admiration and humility. He had come with a simple intention, to see Nia again, perhaps to give her something small. But what he found was more than that. He found a lesson about life, about humanity, and about the power of quiet, simple acts of kindness. It was surprising and powerful. He realized that the people who seemed the weakest or most helpless might also be the most generous in spirit. Nia, sitting quietly yesterday with nothing but her small cup, was today a source of warmth and hope for everyone around her. He stepped closer, wanting to speak, but paused again, letting the moment sink in. Nia handed a small bag of food to a boy with torn shoes. The boy looked up at her with wide eyes, almost in disbelief, and said thank you softly. Nia nodded with a gentle smile. Juma's heart felt heavy with emotion. He thought about the times he had failed to act, the moments when he had turned away. And he knew that he wanted to change. Seeing Nia now had shifted something inside him. A soft wind blew, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and flowers. Nia looked around, noticing people who might need help. She gave a small smile to an elderly man struggling with a heavy bag, helping him adjust it so it did not fall. She gave a bottle of water to a young woman carrying a baby. Every small action was quiet but meaningful, and it seemed to make the street brighter, warmer, and softer. Juma could not stop watching. He realized that she was creating a small world of care right there in the middle of the busy city. He thought about what he could do to help. He still had the coin in his pocket from yesterday. But now, watching Nia, he realized that his gesture could be more than just money. He could offer attention, respect, and care. Perhaps a small food item, a warm drink, or just a kind word could matter as much as coins. And more than that, he could learn from her example. He could let kindness guide his actions even in small ways. The sun began to rise fully, casting a soft golden light over the street. Pigeons cooed softly, children laughed in the distance, and the city began its busy hum. Nia continued her quiet work, handing food, giving water, and smiling at people. Her energy seemed endless, even though she had so little. Juma watched her, feeling a mix of awe, respect, and inspiration. She had turned a simple street corner into a place of life, warmth, and hope. He approached her finally, holding the small coin in his hand. Nia noticed him and smiled, not in expectation but in gentle acknowledgement. Juma felt his heart swell. He realized that this small act could matter. But even more than that, he realized that being present, being aware, and caring were even more powerful. Nia had shown him that. She had turned her own struggles into an opportunity to help, and in doing so, she had changed the atmosphere around her. For the first time, Juma truly understood that kindness was not about wealth or comfort. It was about intention, care, and courage. And he realized that anyone, no matter how little they had, could make a difference. Nia, with her small gestures, had already done so. The street, once ordinary and gray, now felt alive, warm, and welcoming. And Juma knew that he wanted to be part of that change, starting with small, meaningful actions of his own. As he held out the coin to Nia, he felt a sense of humility and gratitude. She accepted it with a gentle nod but gave him a small smile that seemed to say more than words could. In that moment, Juma understood something important. Helping others was not a burden, it was a privilege. And even the smallest act of care, when given sincerely, could spread warmth, hope, and happiness far beyond what one could see. Watching Nia continue her work, Juma felt inspired. The city, the people, and the struggles around him seemed smaller now, more manageable. He realized that even in a world full of challenges, small acts of kindness could make a real difference. And that realization, sparked by the surprising actions of a quiet, gentle girl on a street corner, changed him forever. The sun had fully risen, spreading a soft golden light over the city streets. Juma walked slowly toward Nia, his steps careful and thoughtful. In his hands, he carried a small warm drink in a paper cup and a neatly wrapped piece of bread he had bought from a nearby bakery. The smell of the bread was comforting, and the steam from the drink warmed his hands. He felt nervous but determined. Yesterday he had hesitated. Today he wanted to act, to make a small difference in a meaningful way. He watched Nia for a moment. She was busy as usual, handing food to a small boy who had sat quietly by the curb, and pouring water into a small dish for a stray cat that had wandered near. Her gentle movements, her soft smile, and her calm demeanor filled the street with warmth. Even in the midst of the busy city, surrounded by rushing people and noisy vendors, Nia created a quiet bubble of care and kindness. Juma felt a wave of admiration and humility. How could someone with so little herself give so much to others? He stepped closer, feeling the slight unevenness of the wet pavement under his shoes. The little coin in his pocket felt heavy at first, but he had decided to offer more than just money. He wanted to bring something tangible, something that could give warmth, comfort, and nourishment. It was not about the value of the drink or the bread, but about the intention behind the gesture. That thought made him feel lighter, braver, and more present in the moment. As he reached Nia, she looked up and caught his gaze. Her smile was calm and genuine, a small curve of warmth that made him feel instantly at ease. She did not look surprised or expectant. She simply noticed him and in her gentle way, acknowledged his presence. Juma felt his heart beat faster. It was a strange combination of excitement, nervousness, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from doing what one feels is right. "Good morning," he said softly, holding out the drink and the bread. Nia's eyes widened slightly, not in shock but in gentle surprise. She accepted the items with both hands, nodding her head in gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice soft but steady. The words were simple, yet they carried weight. In that brief exchange, Juma felt a connection that went beyond money, beyond gestures, beyond expectation. It was a connection between two people who recognized the value of care and compassion. Nia carefully set the bread aside and took small sips from the warm drink. The steam rose in the morning air, mingling with the soft sunlight that filtered through the nearby trees. Juma watched as her face relaxed, and for a moment, the quiet weight of the city seemed to lift. He realized that it was not the bread or the drink alone that mattered, it was the thought behind it, the acknowledgement of her struggle, and the simple act of paying attention that created a profound effect. He sat on a low curb nearby, unsure whether to speak more or simply observe. The street was alive with the usual morning activity. Shopkeepers were opening their stores, arranging fruits and vegetables on stalls. Children ran past laughing, and pigeons cooed softly as they pecked at crumbs on the wet pavement. Through it all, Nia moved calmly, offering small gifts of care to anyone who needed it. Her presence was like a quiet light in the midst of the city's busyness, and Juma felt privileged to witness it firsthand. He thought about all the times he had ignored people in need. Each memory brought a small sting of guilt, moments when he had walked past someone begging, when he had turned away from a neighbor, when he had chosen convenience over care. But now, seeing Nia, he understood something important. Compassion was not about grand gestures or large sums of money. It was about noticing, about connection, and about offering whatever small support one could give. Juma remembered how uncomfortable he had felt yesterday when he walked past her. That hesitation, that inner struggle, now seemed distant but familiar. He realized that everyone experiences it, the fear of doing the wrong thing, the worry about personal inconvenience, the uncertainty of whether help will matter. But he also realized that courage does not require perfection. Courage only requires action, even when it is small, even when it is uncertain. And in that moment he felt he had found a small measure of that courage. Nia handed a small piece of bread to a young stray dog that had approached her cautiously. The dog sniffed the bread, then took it gently, wagging its tail in gratitude. Juma smiled quietly. He thought about the many forms that compassion could take. It did not need to be grand or public. It did not need recognition or applause. A small gesture, quietly offered, could change someone's day, or even their life. He realized that he had been wrong to think of helping only in terms of money. Care, attention, and connection could matter more than anything else. As he watched her continue, Juma noticed that Nia had arranged some extra food on a small cardboard box for other people who might pass by. A tired old woman paused and took a piece, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. A boy with messy hair and torn shoes accepted some water and a small snack. Nia smiled at them, nodded politely, and moved on to the next person in need. Juma felt awe. He had never expected that someone with so little could create such meaningful acts of kindness. He reflected on the small choices he had made in his life. How many times had he avoided helping, thinking his small efforts would not matter? How often had he let fear or convenience dictate his actions? And now, in front of Nia, he realized that those small hesitations had cost him a chance to make a difference. But the important thing, he thought, was not regret, it was action. He could choose differently now, and he could learn from her example. Juma finally spoke again, softly. "You inspire me," he said. "I see what you do, and it makes me realize that small acts really matter." Nia looked at him, her eyes warm and calm. She did not speak immediately, but her gentle smile said more than words could. Juma understood that her response was not about praise or approval. It was about understanding, recognition, and shared humanity. In that moment, he felt a quiet bond between them, as if a simple act had bridged the gap between two very different lives. He thought about how the city would continue to rush past them. People would go to work, children would play, vendors would sell, and life would go on. But this small corner, this moment of quiet care, would remain. Even if others did not notice, it mattered. He realized that compassion was not for show, it was for the impact it had, no matter how small. And in Nia's actions, he saw the truth of that lesson. The warmth of the drink and the taste of the bread seemed to carry more than nourishment. They carried connection, acknowledgement, and shared humanity. Juma felt the meaning of kindness in a way he had never understood before. He had given a simple gesture, but it had created a bridge. He had noticed her, acknowledged her presence, and shared a moment of care. And that, he realized, was as important as any grand gesture or large sum of money. As the morning progressed, Juma stayed nearby, watching Nia continue her work. She moved with quiet energy, never seeking recognition, never demanding attention. Each small act was deliberate and gentle, a small thread of care in the tapestry of the busy street. He noticed the subtle ways people responded to her. Some paused to smile, some nodded politely, and some even offered small gestures in return, passing on the kindness. He realized that compassion had a ripple effect, extending far beyond the initial act. Juma thought about the times he had doubted whether his small help would matter. He realized now that it always mattered. Every action, no matter how minor it seemed, created impact. A smile could lift spirits, a cup of warm drink could comfort, a simple acknowledgement could make someone feel seen. Nia's example taught him that kindness did not have to be grand to be meaningful, it only needed sincerity, presence, and care. He reflected on the importance of connection. He had approached Nia not just to give something but to recognize her humanity. And in return she had acknowledged his presence, her smile bridging the gap between their worlds. Compassion was not just giving, it was noticing, understanding, and sharing. That understanding struck him deeply. He realized that connection was the heart of kindness. Money or material help was only one form. Attention, care, and understanding were just as vital. Juma felt a quiet joy as he continued to watch Nia. He thought about the impact she had on the people and animals around her. Even the smallest gestures, the way she tilted a cup of water for a kitten, the way she handed bread to a child, were acts of care that resonated far beyond the moment. He understood now that compassion could change the atmosphere of a place, lighten the burdens of those who were struggling, and create hope where there had been little. The sun climbed higher, casting gentle warmth on the street. Juma realized that he had learned a powerful lesson today. He had seen the surprising strength and generosity of someone with very little, and he had participated even in a small way in that act of compassion. He understood that kindness was not measured by money or size, but by the heart behind it. Nia had shown him that, and in that simple realization, he felt a quiet transformation within himself. As he finished his drink and prepared to move on, Juma looked at Nia one last time. She was smiling at a child who had just received a small snack, her eyes full of calm and understanding. Juma felt a deep gratitude for this moment. He knew that he would carry the lesson with him always, that compassion is not just about giving money, it is about care, connection, and presence. It is about noticing the world around you and taking even the smallest step to make a difference. The sun was now high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the streets of the city. The bustle of people moving through the market, the soft hum of distant traffic, and the occasional laughter of children created a familiar rhythm of life. Juma walked slowly, leaving the little corner where he had spent time with Nia. In his heart, he carried a feeling that was both new and comforting. a lightness that came from understanding something important about life, kindness, and human connection. As he moved through the streets, he thought about everything he had seen that morning. Nia, despite having so little herself, had given so much. She had shared food with hungry children, water with thirsty animals, and her gentle smile with everyone who crossed her path. It was remarkable, Juma thought, how a single person could spread warmth and hope in ways that did not require money, fame, or power. Her actions were quiet, simple, and natural, yet they had created a small ripple in the world, touching the lives of those around her. He reflected on his own actions and choices. For years he had walked past people in need, telling himself that he was too busy or that his help would not make a difference. But now he realized that even the smallest gestures mattered. A coin, a warm drink, a kind word, or even just noticing someone's presence could brighten a person's day and change their mood. The lesson was clear, and it filled him with a sense of responsibility, hope, and gratitude. Juma remembered the way Nia had looked at him when he approached her. Her eyes had been calm and kind, full of understanding and acceptance. In that moment he realized that kindness was not about judgment, expectation, or reward. It was about acknowledging the humanity of others, about offering help because one wanted to, not because one had to. He understood that compassion was an action but also a choice, a conscious decision to see, to care, and to connect. He continued walking slowly, observing the people around him. Some were rushing to work, carrying bags or talking on their phones. Others were sitting quietly at small cafe tables, sipping tea or coffee, watching the city move past them. Children ran in small groups, laughing and playing, unaware of the struggles that many around them were facing. Juma thought about how easy it was to get caught up in one's own life and forget to notice the little struggles of others. But now he felt different. He wanted to notice, to care, and to act. The memory of Nia helping the stray animals returned to him. A small kitten drinking water from her bowl, a puppy wagging its tail as she offered a piece of bread. It was simple, ordinary, yet profoundly moving. Juma realized that kindness did not need to be complicated or grand. It could be as small as sharing a meal, offering a drink, or giving attention to someone who was lonely or ignored. Even the smallest gestures, when given sincerely, could carry immense meaning. He thought about the street itself, how ordinary it had seemed yesterday, and how extraordinary it had felt after witnessing Nia's actions. One small person, quietly acting with care, had transformed the space into a place of warmth and hope. The lesson was powerful and unforgettable. He realized that anyone, anywhere could create similar ripples of kindness. It did not require wealth, status, or special skills. All it required was awareness, empathy, and the courage to act. Juma paused for a moment, standing under a tree that provided some shade. The leaves rustled gently in the wind, and the soft sound of birds added to the calm of the afternoon. He closed his eyes and thought about the people he had ignored in the past, the beggars on the streets, the children asking for small help, the elderly neighbors who needed a kind word or gesture. Each memory brought a pang of regret, but also an understanding. He could not change the past, but he could shape the future. He could choose to notice, to act, and to care. As he resumed walking, Juma reflected on the deeper meaning of what he had learned. Compassion was not a burden. It was not about giving more than one had or about performing heroic acts. It was about seeing people as humans, understanding that every life had value, and offering what one could, even if it was small. The realization brought a calm determination to his heart. He would not ignore those in need again, no matter how small the opportunity appeared. He remembered the small coin in his pocket, the warm drink, and the bread he had given Nia. It seemed like such a tiny thing, yet it had created a connection, a moment of shared humanity, and a lesson he would carry forever. Juma realized that the real value of the gesture was not in the objects themselves, but in the thought, care, and attention behind them. Giving, he understood, was about more than material things. It was about presence, empathy, and understanding. Juma walked past a busy intersection, noticing a man struggling with heavy bags. Without hesitation he stepped forward and offered to help. The man smiled gratefully, and Juma felt the same warmth he had felt when Nia had smiled at him. It was a small act, but it reinforced the lesson he had learned, that kindness, however small, had power. It created connection, it eased burdens, and it reminded both the giver and the receiver of the goodness in the world. He thought about how many people he might help in small ways each day. A smile to a stranger, a nod of recognition, a cup of water to someone in need, these were all opportunities to make a difference. He realized that he did not need to wait for perfect moments or large opportunities. Every day, every encounter, offered a chance to practice kindness, to offer compassion, and to create a small ripple of change. Juma remembered how Nia had been so calm and patient despite her struggles. She had not complained, nor had she demanded anything. Her actions had been effortless, natural and filled with grace. Watching her had inspired him not only to help others but also to rethink his approach to life. He realized that patience, humility and consistency were as important as the acts of giving themselves. True kindness was gentle, persistent and sincere. As he continued walking, he saw a small child crying on the sidewalk. Juma approached and knelt down gently, asking the child if he was okay. The child sniffled and nodded, holding a small toy that had been dropped. Juma returned the toy with a smile, and the child's face lit up. The moment was small, almost invisible to passers-by, yet Juma felt the same quiet joy he had felt watching Nia. He understood that these small moments, multiplied across time and space, created a life of purpose and connection. The city around him was busy, yet Juma felt calm. He noticed a woman struggling with a stroller, a man looking lost while trying to find an address, a street cat shivering in the shade. Each observation reminded him of the lesson he had learned, that life was full of opportunities to act with care, and that even the smallest gestures could matter. He promised himself that he would remain aware, that he would notice those in need, and that he would act with kindness whenever possible. He thought about how easy it was to walk past, to ignore, to pretend that one's actions did not matter. But he also realized that in those small choices, whether to act or to ignore, one's character was shaped. Juma felt a sense of responsibility. He wanted to be someone who chose compassion, someone who noticed, someone who acted even when it was inconvenient or small. The memory of Nia offering bread to the boy and water to the stray animals stayed with him. He remembered the calm joy in her eyes, the quiet dignity with which she moved through the street, and the ripple of happiness she created. He realized that these small, consistent acts of care had a power that was far greater than he had imagined. They changed the environment, lifted the spirits of others, and reminded everyone that even in a busy, harsh world, kindness existed. Juma continued through the streets, walking past markets, shops, and cafes. He felt more aware of the people around him. A man carrying heavy packages received a small nod of help from Juma. A woman balancing groceries and a child's hand was offered a brief smile and encouragement. A street cat meowed softly, and Juma reached down to gently pat it. Each action was small, but each carried the meaning of connection and care. By the time he returned home, Juma felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His heart was lighter than it had been in years. He realized that the lesson he had learned was simple yet profound. Small gestures, acts of attention, and expressions of care could change someone's day, perhaps even their life. And more than that, they changed him too. He felt more alive, more aware, and more connected to the world around him. He thought about the future, about all the small opportunities that awaited him. Every encounter could be a chance to make a difference. Every gesture, no matter how minor, could carry significance. And in that realization he found purpose. Compassion was not just a choice, it was a responsibility, a way of living, a path to creating light in a world that often felt rushed, indifferent, or harsh. Juma sat quietly by his window that evening, reflecting on the day. The streets were calm, the sunlight fading, and the city preparing for night. He thought about Nia, the girl who had sparked this transformation in him. She had shown him that generosity was not measured by wealth or comfort, but by intention, care, and connection. She had reminded him that even the smallest gestures could create ripples of hope, warmth, and joy. He made a silent promise to himself. He would notice those in need. He would act when he could. He would offer kindness freely without expectation. He would let compassion guide his actions even in the small things, because he had seen that small things could matter more than he had ever imagined. Juma felt a lightness in his heart that evening, a sense of purpose and calm. The lesson was clear, simple, and unforgettable. He had learned that kindness was not about money, status, or power, it was about seeing, caring, and connecting. And with that understanding he felt ready to face the world differently with awareness, empathy, and a willingness to make a difference, one small gesture at a time.